This is the original podcast edition of The Guild of the Cowry Catchers by Abigail Hilton, now part of the complete Pirates of Wefrevane series. The books are available as audiobooks, ebooks, and paperbacks. This podcast originally aired from 2010 to 2014. Stick around after the story for commentary from me, the author, more than a decade later. The Guild of the Cowry Catchers, a novel of pirates and Panamindorah. Written and narrated by Abigail Hilton. Book 1. Embers. Warning: this novel was intended for people who shop in the grown-up section of the bookstore. It is not intended for children or young teens. If you need to ask whether you will be offended, you probably will. Episode 7.
Hi, I'm James Durham, author of the award-winning podcast novel Fetidus, the foundation for the ethical treatment of the innocently damned, undead, and supernatural. You can listen to my post-apocalyptic film noir-esque political thriller at fetidus.org. Previously on the Cowry Catchers podcast. With Silvio in a friendlier mood, he and Gerard start back to the ship, stopping on the way to inspect the tea house where Gerard met Gawain. They find the tea house abandoned, but Gawain has left them a taunting clue, a map of an island on the wall, traced in the pelts, and perhaps the bones of Grishnards. The evening takes an ugly turn when they get back to the docks and find Alcer tormenting a foxling urchin, while the sailors make bets on the sport. It is immediately apparent that Alcer intends to threaten Silvio with this display. Silvio throws a knife at Alcer, and Alcer flees. Over the next 3 days, Silvio drives the crew mercilessly. Thessalyn brings the unpleasantness to a halt by playing her harp on deck, and Silvio finally sleeps. By the next morning, Silvio has gone through his entire collection of maps and identified the island.
Chapter 19. What Happened in a Closet.
Most sailors in Wefrevane do not use advanced instruments of navigation. They are aware of such tools, but they believe them to be cumbersome and unnecessary. Sailors in the Crescent are rarely out of sight of land, and their navigational skills consist of an intimate knowledge of the coastlines of thousands of islands and their accompanying sandbars, tides, and reefs. In addition, Grishnard sailors rely heavily on griffins to fly up and look around. Gawain, a guide to Wefrevane.
Thessalyn did want to thank Silvio in person. She had been given many fine objects over the years, but she'd left most of them on Holovaris. Since that time, she'd made a point of asking for payment in either room and board, traveling supplies, or cowries to buy those things. She ran her hands over the pages of the book, sniffed its leather, and listened with shining eyes as Gerard read her the titles of the stories.
She loves stories,
thought Gerard.
She always tells them to everyone else, and no one tells them to her.
Nothing would do but that they should go to the Admiral's cabin at once. When he answered the door, Gerard thought she might have hugged him if he hadn't taken a swift step back and offered a hand, instead of a shoulder, to her questing fingers.
"You are very welcome, lady,"
he said in response to her thanks.
"You more than deserve it. Last night I was—"
Half mad?
Thought Gerard.
"Tired,"
continued Silvio.
"I don't always sleep so well."
"Neither does Gerard,"
said Thessalyn, busily feeling her way around the outer office and into the library. Gerard frowned, not appreciating the comparison. Silvio noticed and was instantly amused. Gerard could tell he was about to say something embarrassing when Thessalyn spoke again, her fingers flicking over the books.
"Gerard said a lot of these are Gawain's."
"Were, yes. I'd like to bring him to join them as, I don't know, a lampshade, perhaps. I think he'd make a fine lampshade."
"That's not very nice, Admiral,"
chided Thessaline, sniffing delicately at one of the parchments. For a Grishnard, she had an extremely sensitive nose.
As Gerard may have mentioned, I'm not a very nice person.
You were nice to me.
I make a very great exception for you. Don't be surprised if I occasionally slip. Nice is not a part of my skill set.
I'm not sure I believe you.
Thessaline was examining a shelf of navigational instruments. Silvio had an unusually large collection, as he liked to navigate without the aid of griffins or Pegasus, something almost unheard of in Wefravain.
By the way, there's a storm coming. A big one. I'd like to sit on deck a bit before it gets here. I haven't been in the sun much these last few days.
A storm? How do you know?
She always knows. It's part of being a prophetess.
I am not a prophetess,
said Thessaline, with a flick of her tail.
It's not a feeling. I'm not guessing. I know there's a storm coming. The same way you two know what's on the far side of the room, without walking over and touching it.
Silvio looked at Gerard quizzically. Gerard shrugged.
If she says there's a big storm coming, then there's a big storm coming.
Silvio considered this.
In that case, I have things to do. Out of my office, little lambs.
So they went out and sat on the quarterdeck in the sun. The day was clear and bright, without a trace of clouds. Thessaline had put on a sailcloth shirt and breeches to go about deck. She went bare-pawed, her heavy gold hair whipping in the breeze, her cheeks turning pink in the sun. Gerard thought she looked adorable. She stretched out on the warm boards and laid her head in his lap, her hair pooling around them, and he read to her. Meanwhile, the bewildered sailors began the process of preparing the ship for a storm, securing and removing everything on deck, furling sails, and preparing a sea anchor. Below deck, Gerard knew they were just as busy. He wondered how long it would take for the ship's boys to go about Silvio's library, putting every book in place so that the doors on the cabinets could be shut. The oars would be stowed, and all the portals shut tight. Preparing for a major storm involved quite a bit of work, and Gerard was a little surprised that Silvio had decided to act on Thessaline's statement.
You won't be sorry, though.
About noon, Gerard went below decks to get something to eat. As he navigated the dark labyrinth of corridors, a shape stepped out of the gloom and tugged him gently into a closet.
Hello, Gerard.
For a moment he couldn't process what he was seeing. The priestess, dressed in what looked like dark silk, her deep blue eyes glinting in the half-light.
Oh, mistress, how did you...
He became aware that he was staring rudely and dropped his gaze.
Of course she flew here on a griffin or Pegasus or even a wyvern. She probably just arrived.
She tilted his chin up, a smile playing around the corners of her mouth.
I'm sorry to have startled you, Captain.
No, you're not. You're enjoying it.
Gerard became aware of how very close they were standing in the small space. He started to back out of the closet, but she put her hands on his elbows and stopped him. She was only a little shorter than he, and much stronger than he would have expected.
I won't keep you long. I only wanted to warn you that a severe storm is coming.
We know. Thess told us.
Morchella raised an eyebrow.
Did she?
Yes, she always knows when a storm is coming, ever since she was a little girl.
Interesting. I suppose being blind makes other senses keener. Still, it makes me wonder whether she's distant kin of mine.
Gerard didn't know what that meant, or whether he should ask.
How are you getting along with Silvio?
Continued Morchella.
Better.
Gerard thought for a moment.
He's still threatening to kill me, but I'm not sure he really would. He likes Thess, but Alsair did something nasty on Cern that upset him.
Gerard told her about the foxling. Morchella laughed.
That would do it, especially on Cern. Probably gave him nightmares. He can be annoyingly sensitive about a few things.
Gerard frowned. Sensitive was the last word he would have ever applied to Silvio.
He thinks I want his job.
Morchella ran a finger down the front of Gerard's jacket. Her voice was playful.
Do you?
No.
Gerard tried again to step out of the closet. This time she leaned up, put one hand around the back of his head, and the other around his waist and kissed him on the mouth. Gerard was surprised, almost frightened, and he didn't know what to do. Morchella pushed up the back of his shirt and ran a hand along his bare spine. The shock made him gasp, and her tongue flicked inside his mouth. She stepped away suddenly, and Gerard stumbled back against the doorframe. He could feel his face burning. He wanted to run. Morchella pushed past him out of the closet and stopped to whisper in his ear.
You're doing fine, Gerard. I heard that you talked to Gawain. That's very good. But next time try killing him. I'll be watching.
Gerard raised his head a moment later and looked around. The corridor was empty. He drew a shuddering breath. He felt sick and guilty and profoundly confused. He couldn't remember where he'd been going or what he'd meant to do. He visited the head. He thought he might vomit, but he didn't. When he came back on deck again, clouds were rolling in from the south, but the sun was still shining. Silvio was talking to Thessaline. He was wearing brilliant blue wool, hoop earrings, and a fur cape made of what looked like wolf fur, an extinct species in Wefervain, though their pelts could still be bought on occasion. Silvio had had food brought up, but no table or chairs, due to the increasing motion of the ship.
Well, Gerard, it appears that your wife has many talents. In addition to making you almost tolerable, she can also predict the weather. Perhaps I shall make her my pilot. The one I've got isn't entirely satisfactory.
Gerard smiled faintly and put an arm around Thessaline, who snuggled against him. The wind had grown cold.
Oh, have some fawn pie. It's not Gawain, but we can pretend.
Thank you. I'm not hungry.
Silvio looked at him narrowly.
Sick already? These waves will get worse.
Gerard glanced at the bank of black clouds approaching from the south.
Is the priestess up here?
No. Why do you ask?
Because I saw her a little while ago below deck. She spoke to me.
Silvio looked at him even more closely, and Gerard couldn't quite meet his eyes.
She does that sometimes. It's always startling. We didn't see her up here.
She's done it before. To you.
Silvio pursed his lips.
She's turned up unexpectedly, yes. I've always assumed she came on a wyvern. The gods are swift and secretive.
What did she say to you, Gerard?
Asked Thessaline, real concern in her voice.
You don't sound very happy about it.
Gerard sighed.
She can read me even without eyes. She just asked about what happened on CERN.
It began to rain at that moment. Silvio looked at Thessaline.
Lady, I think you'd better go below deck. Gerard, I want to talk to you in my office.
A short time later, Gerard was back in Silvio's outer office. Everything had gotten a lot neater since his last visit. Silvio had a single map on the desk, along with a compass and several other instruments.
Am I in trouble, sir?
Silvio looked up.
I don't know. Are you?
Gerard said nothing. He felt sick again. Silvio sighed.
I'm going to give you some more of that useful advice you never listened to. Be careful of the mistress. I've survived by doing several things. One of them is by staying well away from the police. Another is making sure that I am liked but not loved by Morchella. I'm her pet, a vicious little pet that bites every hand but hers, and she likes that. You don't want to be more than a pet, Gerard.
Gerard shifted uncomfortably.
Why are you...
She was extremely fond of Arundel. But she devours things she loves. She can't help it. It's her nature. Like the wyverns. She ate him up inside. He should have been put out of his misery after that, but instead, she gave him to me. He always had a cruel streak, but now... There's practical mean. That's me. And then there's sadistic. That's Arundel. I'm not saying I've never been there, but I don't live there. And he does.
Gerard stared at the floor.
Why are you telling me this? I thought you wanted me killed, Silvio.
Killed, sure, but I don't want to deal with you in that condition. You'd be worse than Arundel. Now stop acting like a wounded animal. Whatever she did to you, it can't have been worse than what was done to me when I was no bigger than that foxling you rescued. Go get some sleep. I'm sure we'll need you to haul on a rope soon enough.
Chapter 20. A Knife and a Rope.
Foxlings are born with a loose scruff, much like that of a fox kit, by which they may be carried. Many retain a remnant of this scruff into adulthood. However, no foxling beyond the age of 2 would appreciate being lifted in this way. Gawain, the non-Grishnards of Wefravain.
They did need him. By midnight, the waves were as high as Gerard had ever seen them in the Crescent. Thessaline kept an admirable calm, in spite of the fact that they were being more or less flung about their cabin. She and Gerard had both been raised to the sea, and although she threw up her supper, she did not stay sick for long. Gerard had not been seasick since he was a child. He was not surprised when a beating on his door turned out to be a sailor, saying that the boatswain was asking for help. Gerard put on sealskin breeches and coat. He did not wear his boots, preferring to have his claws free to grip the deck. He saw that Silvio had wisely put up the smallest possible scrap of sail, and they were running before the wind. Gerard could not see any islands in the driving rain, nor could he hear breakers. That was a good sign. Their worst danger would be running aground on one of the innumerable reefs, rocks, and sandbars that surrounded the smaller islands. Gerard helped babysit the sail. He was bigger and heavier than most of the other sailors, and he'd had plenty of experience in storms, as Halivaras was near the mouth of the Crescent. He glanced at Silvio and Farrell up on the quarterdeck and shook his head.
Sailing without griffins in these conditions is just foolish, Silvio.
Morning brought a measure of relief. In spite of the driving rain, they could see an island off to their left, and were able to ascertain with fair certainty that it was Mermouth, one of Lecklock's distant holdings. The gray seas were as high as ever, and the wind fierce. Gerard took turns with everyone else on deck, tied with a long rope to the mainmast. Thessaline insisted on coming out a few times, and Gerard made her tie a lifeline around her waist as well. He was surprised at how the sailors welcomed her, and how respectfully they spoke to her. Although sea-watch sailors enjoyed the company of women as much as any sailor, they believed that a woman aboard ship was bad luck. In spite of this, Gerard knew that Silvio had managed to keep a number of girls at various times over the last few years, the most recent being a Gazumel, who had apparently sailed with them for about half a year, and then run off one day on Haplag. The rumor was that several of the sailors had encouraged her departure with rocks while the admiral was away. This story, combined with Silvio's enmity, was the reason Gerard had never tried to bring Thessaline aboard during his days as a watchmaster. Now, however, he sensed an undercurrent of awe in the way the sailors spoke to her. After asking some questions, he discovered that the lower deck thought Thessaline nearly as lucky as a cured selkie tail hanging from the mizzen. The idea had blossomed the day she charmed the admiral out of his black humor, and, when word circulated that she had predicted the storm without a cloud in the sky, they had all become convinced that she was a seer. Her blindness and white minstrel's clothes only added to her mystery and appeal. Gerard told her all this as they lay lashed in a hammock during one of his breaks. She giggled against his chest.
Sailors are silly, aren't they? Like children.
They're only honest.
Said Gerard with gravity, and she punched him in the shoulder.
If you're not good luck, then nothing is.
I was talking to Silvio while you were away,
she continued.
I saw that. Has he told you all his troubles yet?
Sympathetic minstrels made good counselors for many reasons. Because they traveled widely, they were viewed as impartial and experienced. Any passing minstrel might be asked for confidential advice about marriage, investment, or children. Thessaline was special, though. Shelts who would not normally trust their own mothers would find themselves telling her their life stories after only a brief meeting. Gerard doubted that even Silvio was immune. Thessaline shook her head.
Nothing like that. I told him you were really sorry about what Alcer did on CERN. I told him you'd been fretting about it for days.
Gerard squirmed.
Thess, that wasn't...
Thessalin lay a finger on his lips.
He said he knew. He said to forget about it. I asked him whether he would let Alcer back on the ship if Alcer apologized.
Gerard opened his eyes in the darkness.
What did he say to that?
Thessalin frowned.
He changed the subject. Made a lot of jokes. A few minutes later he said, I don't like griffins, I just don't. No Holliver is going to change that. I asked him why, but he wouldn't tell me. I think he might eventually, but I'm not sure it will help.
Gerard ran his fingers through her hair.
Thess, you are amazing.
Not really. I didn't get permission for Alcer to come back.
I haven't given permission for Alcer to come back. He has a lot of explaining to do.
They tried to make the port on Pirnon that day, but the wind and waves were too wild. They could not get into the lee of the island, and the opportunity was lost. Night fell again, and they proceeded on their frightening journey through the darkness. Gerard knew that Silvio had been able to take fairly accurate readings of their location, so in theory they should be headed in a safe direction. However, the wind veered several times that night. The waves actually grew higher and rougher, crashing over the bow each time the ship plummeted into a trough. By the time the gray dawn broke, Gerard was sure that no one had the slightest idea where they were. The day was very dark. Everyone strained for sight of an island, anything to identify their location. The sailors' shifts grew longer as crews worked to pump out the water accumulating in the hold. The ceiling of Gerard and Thessalin's cabin began to leak. Gerard mentioned it to Silvio, not as a complaint, but as a statement about the condition of the ship. Silvio immediately moved them into his own cabin and moved himself in with Farrell. Not that Silvio slept much. Gerard didn't think he left the deck all day. By the third night, everyone was exhausted, and they still had no idea where they were. Gerard heard some of the sailors whispering that they weren't in the Crescent at all, that they'd been driven into the open sea to be lost forever in its vastness. Gerard knew that wasn't true. In fact, they had to be getting close to the center of the Crescent, into the region of the small kingdoms. These were his home waters. He knew them well, and this did not ease his mind. The thick sprinkling of islands near the center of Wefrevane were laced with deadly reefs. The morning of the fourth day dawned darker still. Just as the gray dawn began to illuminate the mountains of water around them, lightning struck a spar and sent it crashing down on deck, hanging half over the side of the ship. Everyone ran to cut the trailing pieces. The ship had just started up a wave, and the deck was sloping steeply. Sailors slipped in their hurry, but they were clipped into the lifeline, so they weren't in too much danger. Silvio, who had been below decks only moments before, had not yet tied his rope, and he went bounding up the deck without one. Gerard came up beside him just as the fallen spar slipped completely into the sea and caught the pull of the wave. The ship jerked almost broadside to the swell. Suddenly they were nearly sideways on an almost vertical slope. The wave crested over the side of the ship and crashed waist-deep across the deck.
We're going to broach,
thought Gerard.
We're going to die.
He slipped, but his claws splayed and caught him, gouging deep furrows in the wood. He looked to his right and saw the flash of Silvio's hair beneath the water. Without even thinking, Gerard reached out, caught Silvio by the scruff, and dragged him to his feet as they started down the far side of the wave. Gerard yelped as something sliced into his forearm. He dropped Silvio, and they stared at each other, the deck now free of water and sloping crazily in the opposite direction. A knife flashed briefly as it toppled across the deck and over the side.
You cut me,
thought Gerard, too amazed to be angry.
You actually cut me.
Silvio bounced up again and launched himself across the deck towards the trailing spar. Gerard followed him. There was no time to think about what had just happened. The ship would not survive another wave in its present state. 3 other sailors had already reached the spar and were hacking desperately at it with axes. Gerard took an axe, and in 3 blows he managed to sever the main mass of the spar. Still, it clung to the ship by its ropes, attached to the upper rigging. Looking up, Gerard saw that Silvio had climbed up and out onto the perilously splintered section. He was probably the only person other than a ship's boy light enough to do what had to be done, but it was still a near-suicidal act without a lifeline. They were hurtling sideways towards the trough of the wave, and Gerard didn't know if the ship would have time to turn, even if the spar could be freed. Then Silvio was slicing through the last of the ropes. The spar fell away, and Pharrell was leaning on the rudder, and they were turning. Then they crashed into the trough of the wave. Not completely broadside, but near enough. Gerard was thrown through the splintered railing and over the side of the ship. He yelped as the lifeline bit into his ribs, and then he was underwater in darkness and terror, clawing for air. The rope wrenched him out of the water again, and his ribs were on fire, but he was clawing his way over the side of the ship. Gerard saw with relief that they were straightening out, preparing to take the next wave head-on. He looked up to see Silvio standing over him. Gerard thought that he might have been pulling on the rope, but he couldn't be sure. Silvio was shouting orders to trim the sail, but he paused to crouch down and bellow in Gerard's ear.
"Ship's healer, now!"
Gerard looked down and saw the blood streaming over his arm from the knife wound. In his excitement, he'd hardly felt it, but the cut was deep.
"Now!"
repeated Silvio. He walked with Gerard to the top of the stairs and took Gerard's lifeline when he removed it. Gerard watched Silvio tie the rope.
All you had to do was cut it, and you would have been rid of me.
Chapter 21. Home Waters.
Panamindorah's 3 moons play a complex role in sailing and in the life of the inhabitants of Wefravain. The temple festivals are centered around lunar events. Most islands use Red Moon with its predictable 60-day cycle to measure the months. However, some islands and Minihunty still use 15-day yellow months. Blue Moon is sometimes called Sailor's Plague because of its erratic, often unpredictable behavior. It can influence the tides in unexpected ways, and a great deal of ink is expended each year on almanacs that claim to predict the patterns of Blue Moon. Most of them are useless. Gwaine, a guide to Wefravain.
The ship's healer was a smallish Grishnard of about 60, a sour creature, overfond of sweet leaf. He washed Gerard's wound in stinging salt water, smeared nettle paste on it, and bound it up tight in boiled linen. By this time, Gerard's ribs were aching worse than the knife wound. He knew he was going to be black and blue where the rope had caught him, and wondered if he'd broken ribs. He was swaying in a hammock, watching the healer finish the bandage, when his eyes fluttered closed. Gerard woke to the sound of voices. The lantern on its chain in the ceiling was still swinging crazily, but Gerard thought the motion had diminished. Several other sailors had crowded into the room. One was the youngest of his wardens, whimpering as he leaned against the wall. He had, apparently, dislocated his shoulder. Silvio was talking to the healer. When he saw Gerard stir, he gave a brisk motion with his hand.
"Come."
Gerard struggled to his feet and followed Silvio unsteadily out the door and along the dark passage.
"How's your arm?"
asked Silvio over his shoulder.
All right, I suppose.
"Don't ever do that again."
Don't ever do what again?
"Pick me up like that."
They had reached the hatch to the upper deck, and Silvio climbed into the dusky light. Gerard saw that it was almost dark again.
I thought you were going overboard. You didn't have a lifeline. Why did you stab me?
Silvio turned to glare at him.
"I panicked."
He spat out the word as though he hated it, but couldn't think of any more appropriate.
"Just don't do it again."
Gerard nodded.
You never say thank you, do you? Or, I'm sorry. My ribs hurt worse than where you cut me.
Silvio grunted. He was scanning the dark sky.
You could have cut my lifeline.
"Ran out of knives."
Said Silvio, who was famously never without a sharp object.
"Besides, I think you're about to be useful. There it is. Look."
He was pointing at something in the sky. Gerard squinted.
A griffin.
He skidded down to the main deck. The rain had slackened, but they were still running before a strong wind in heavy seas. Gerard ran up and down the deck, waving his arms. The circling griffin dropped at once, struggling to control his descent in the high winds. Gerard knew well before he hit the deck that it was Alcere. He was soaking wet and shivering. He looked thinner, and Gerard's heart lurched at the sight. He was angry, too, but he kept his face neutral. This was not the time to discuss what had happened on CERN.
"Where are we?"
demanded Gerard.
"Almost home.
Shouted Alcere.
I lost you 3 days ago. I've been looking and looking."
Gerard knew Alcere would have been following the ship, and he had suspected that the storm had separated them. He nodded.
Where's almost home?
Alcere ducked his head to their right.
Malabar's off that way. Scorp is back behind you.
Gerard's eyes opened wide.
That means we're headed straight between Malabar 3 and 5.
Alcere nodded.
That's what I came to tell you.
Gerard drew a deep breath.
There's still time. Get out there and look for the buoys. You can guide us through.
Alcere didn't argue. He turned, ran along the ship, and launched himself into the air. For one moment, it looked like he might be driven into the sea, but then he gained height, beating madly, jerking this way and that in the high winds. Gerard turned and ran back toward Silvio.
We're near Holivaris,
He began when he reached the quarterdeck.
I guessed that. We need a port. We're leaking badly, and we've lost so many spars and so much rigging that we'd be crippled even in a calm sea. We're on our third and last sea anchor. Maps of the small kingdoms are abysmal. I've never sailed here without a local guide. Also, my coxswain seems to have gotten himself swept overboard. No one can find him.
Gerard nodded.
We could probably make port on Malabar if we survive the night. The problem is we're headed between Malabar 3 and 5. There's a solid line of reef between those two islands. It's a ship graveyard. My brother and I used to pick up trinkets washed up from the wrecks after every storm. There's one place to cross, and it's marked with a couple of buoys. If Alcere can find it, he can guide us through.
Silvio considered this, looking out at the darkening sea.
How big are these buoys?
About as big as you.
Gerard almost said it aloud, but opted to hold his arms out instead. Silvio made a face.
And how long until we reach them? Could we try to veer away?
Gerard shook his head.
We'd run aground on the sandbars around the islands. We've been lucky to keep away from them without knowing where we were. We'll reach the reef in perhaps half a watch. That should give Alcere plenty of time to find the buoys.
But he did not find them. Twice Alcere returned to the ship to report. Gerard could hear the breakers now crashing across the horns of coral. The rain had picked up again, and the night was black. The third time he returned to the main deck, Alcere looked wild.
The buoys must have washed away.
He leaned over and spoke in Gerard's ear.
Please let me take you off. This ship is going to founder.
It was all Gerard could do to keep from cuffing his ear and shouting at him.
And leave Thessalin?
I'll come back for her. Please, Gerard, you don't know how bad it is out there. The rowboats will never make it. I saw another ship already grounded on the reef. I couldn't find a single shell alive.
No, we're not leaving anyone.
He thought for a moment.
Take me up.
Alcere stepped away from him, shaking his head violently.
Oh, no.
Yes.
Shouted Gerard against the wind.
You're too busy trying to stay airborne to look properly.
Gerard saw that Silvio and Farrell had come down onto the lower deck, but they did not try to interfere. He jumped forward suddenly, grabbed Alcere's ruff, and vaulted onto his back. He knew there was a danger of Alcere trying to take him away, as he'd wanted to, but Gerard didn't think Alcere would act against a direct order. He'd been too well trained. Alcere responded by lying down on the deck.
Gerard, no, please. You don't understand. I flipped 4 times just now. I almost went into the sea. Gerard, we'll both drown.
I said go,
bellowed Gerard, but Alcere only whimpered.
You're just punishing me.
Gerard ran a hand under the griffin's throat and along his lower beak. He tilted Alcere's head to look at him upside down.
Have I ever taken you into a situation I couldn't get you out of?
Alcere looked at him for a long moment. Finally, he shook his head.
Trust me.
Alcere drew a shuddering breath.
I suppose I'd rather die with you than anyone else.
He stood and leapt into the wind. You have been listening to The Guild of the Cowry Catchers by Abigail Hilton. Copyright Abigail Hilton. Cowry Catchers is an illustrated podcast. Artwork for this episode was created by Sarah Cloutier. To view these illustrations, and to learn more about this world and its author, visit the website at www.cowrycatchers.com. This podcast included the vocal talents of
Nathan Lowell
as Gerard,
Kim the comic book goddess
as Marcella, Kimmy Alexander as Thessalyn,
Norm Sherman
as Silvio,
Chris Lester
as Gwaine,
Ryan Stevenson
as Alsair. Sound effects for this podcast were generously provided by SoundSnap and the Free Sound Project. The intro music for this podcast was Grace by Beth Quist. The outro music is Moonlight Flowers by Amoeba, both licensed with permission from Magnatune.net. This episode also included music by Diana Rowan from Magnatune.net, Kevin MacLeod at Incompetech.com, and Jamie Saber from Magnatune.net. All music was licensed with permission.
This is a standard copyright now. This podcast is provided for your personal enjoyment only. You can download and archive the episodes for your personal use. You may not re-upload, mirror, or publicly redistribute the audio files, nor can you alter, remix, or create derivative works. And I'm back. This is 2025 Abby with some comments on this story. So obviously I am playing with some reversals of common gender roles here. I wanted to write a sexual harassment scene between a man and a woman where the roles are reversed and where it is not sexy. Because the few times I have seen this done or had seen it done in film, usually, or books, when I wrote this novel, it seems like a lot of times these situations, yeah, it was bad, quote, I'm going to interrupt myself to say that this is a kitchen table recording, and my cat is in my lap, and he might interrupt. And also, the refrigerator just kicked in. So anyway, I had seen these kinds of situations almost always presented in a way that in no way resembled how actual assault or harassment feels, which is not sexy, not even slightly sexy. Like, it seemed like these kinds of scenes, when they involved a woman harassing a man, I felt like subconsciously the men writing these scenes didn't want to imagine how that would really feel for themselves. They didn't want to imagine it. So instead, they imagined this taboo, sexy situation where, like, oh no, it's wrong and it's bad and don't go there, don't do it. But like, actually, it's actually sexy. And that is not how sexual harassment feels. So I wanted any men listening to actually drop into that space and know how frightening and awful and powerless that feels, even when it's a relatively mild thing that happens. So in this particular scene in the book, no actual sex occurred, no she didn't grab his junk. Wasn't that long, wasn't that extensive, but it's frightening if I wrote it correctly, and scarring. And you also have that thing where Gerard has this thing happen. He hasn't processed it yet. He freezes when it happens, which is also extremely common, and he's going to keep second guessing himself about what he did. And then he's got to return to the party, which obviously it's not a party in the book, although that is so often what you have to return to after something like this happens, and try to act normal, even though something really traumatic has just occurred. And obviously that kind of feeling can occur in other situations. Sometimes you just get a horrible phone call and you have to go back to the people that you were talking to. And this situation, everything's actually going kind of well for the first time in quite a while. Like, Silvio and Thessalyn are talking to each other. It's very friendly. It's very safe. There's a little bit of opening up happening. Silvio is making jokes. He is being friendly and clever. And that's what's going on. And then this awful thing happens out of sight of everyone else. And Gerard is suddenly off step and out of key with what is going on and traumatized. And so I was trying to capture what that feels like and how just like a brief groping in a subway or a bathroom or a crowded elevator can just have this horrible impact that is difficult to shake off and that can have lasting scars, even though it wasn't that big of a thing. And obviously we're in a novel here, so bigger things are coming. Anyway, that was what I was trying to capture, and particularly for male readers, I was trying to make them feel what it feels like. And I'm still happy with that, I find, listening to this more than a decade after I wrote it. I feel like I captured that fairly well. Silvio, of course, recognizes the signs immediately because he has been assaulted plenty of times, unfortunately, and he cottons on immediately to what is wrong with Gerard. And there's some sympathy there, but then also Silvio has had to put himself back together by hand. And so there's also this kind of like buck up and get over it attitude, which is not helpful. I feel like this is also a good point to mention that I am a huge Patrick O'Brian fan. I think I've already said that in these notes, but if I haven't, huge Patrick O'Brian fan. All of my sailing jargon and knowledge is gleaned from those books, which, if you read them, are very extensive on the sailing jargon. They're kind of well known for it to such a degree that you might want to listen to them instead of read them if you haven't consumed them before, because that does allow you to sort of zone out a little bit when he starts talking endlessly about the sails and rigging. But they're wonderful books. I've listened to the entire 21-book series twice, and I've listened to my favorites many times. And so stuff that happened in the storm, that sort of thing, is certainly informed by those books. I'm sure that some of the language I use for the sailing stuff is probably British. There's probably a different American word for some of that stuff because I got all my sailing terms from Patrick O'Brian. And some of it might even be things that he made a mistake, or he chose a relatively rarefied term for something more common, and I'm probably using that term. So I know that most of the people listening to my books are not sailors, and as long as I have something that feels real, are probably not going to nitpick all of my sailing jargon. But I do love his books a lot, and there's definitely bits and pieces of influence throughout these novels from Patrick O'Brian. Listening to this did remind me of where I was when I wrote it. I don't know if those of you who are authors have that experience where reading back through something you wrote or listening back through it reminds you of where you were when you wrote it. But I was in a little coffee shop called Moonstruck Coffee in Beaverton, Oregon, near Portland. I was working in the ICU, and it was my day off. It was the weekend, and I was sitting in there, and it was fall. I remember that it was fall, and the leaves outside were really beautiful, and I was kind of having a little bit of trouble getting the wheels spinning and deciding what came next. And then the storm hit, and the story just kind of took over. Like, I just slipped into liminal space, and the story just unspooled in front of me, and I looked up, an hour and a half later and remembered where I was. That coffee shop is unfortunately gone. It was a victim of COVID. I think Moonstruck Chocolate is still around. They were a chocolatier. They made all kinds of really beautiful chocolate confections that were tasty, but honestly more beautiful than they were tasty. But they made really good mochas and really good coffee. And I wrote quite a bit of Cowry Catchers sitting in the back area of that coffee shop. The other thing that might be worth mentioning is, at this point in the story, this is so embarrassing. This shows you what a green writer I was when I wrote this. I really thought this was going to be like a 50,000 word novel. I really thought when I started this that it would be a short novel that, as I said in an earlier comment section, I thought this was going to explain where Gerard came from for purposes of the big novel, which was Walk Upon High, which ended up being a trunk novel. I thought this was going to be his origin story and background, and that I would wrap it up at about 50,000 words. And even though that can happen to you at any phase of your writing career, you can always massively under or overestimate how long something is going to be. So I'm not criticizing or laughing at myself for that so much, but just the way this story starts with the number of characters and the amount of plot threads in play and all the things going on, it would be obvious to me now that a story like this is not going to wrap up in 50,000 words. Because the way that you keep a story tight like that is to limit the setting. Definitely don't give the characters the option of going to thousands of islands. I use air quotes. Like, you need to limit the setting, keep them on an estate, keep them in a room, keep them on one ship. That will limit the setting. But you got to limit the setting, and then you got to limit the number of characters and the number of problems that they need to solve. And none of those things are even remotely controlled or limited in this story as it begins, which is not a problem if it's an epic fantasy, which is what it is. But anyway, I'm sorry for the noise. That is my cat, Newton. He has got a food puzzle. And yes, they make these things for cats. He is a clever fellow, so it gives him something to do. Anyway, the full cast portion of this story, which originally was 5 little books and now is the first 2 chunky books in the complete series, that ended up being 300,000 words. So that was the first arc, and I'm sorry for all that chirping noise. That's not real birds. That's the bird toy that Newt is playing with. Okay, so that's the first arc, and the first 2 books in the Now series will feel, if you read through them, kind of like they bleed into each other. It's kind of one long arc, and I was planning to stop there originally, and then I wrote 3 more books, which tie up the whole series much, much better. You'll be happier if you enjoy this that I wrote 3 more books. But anyway, I thought at that point in time, when I was sitting in that coffee shop in Beaverton, that this was a 50,000 word story, and that I was like halfway through maybe. Which I suppose at the end of what is now part 1, I could have just wrapped it up there and implied that they went on to have future adventures that ended in disaster, but that wouldn't have been a good place to end a story. I hate it when people end stories in places like that. And I didn't. All right, I will see you in the next episode. This is Abigail Hilton, and you have been listening to the Pirates of Wefravain saga. Join me on Patreon for early episodes, long-form interviews, forum access, personal updates, and lots of artwork, including maps and species charts. That's patreon.com/Abigail Hilton. If you want the whole story now with no interruptions and some remastering of the early books for sound quality, you can find the entire series at shop.abigailhilton.com, along with all my other novels. The audiobooks are delivered by BookFunnel. Background music was Hidden Sky by Jamie Sieber, licensed from Magnatune.net circa 2014. The Guild of the Cowry Catchers podcast is an audio adaptation of the Pirates of Wefravain saga, written and produced by Abigail Hilton. Original production copyright 2010. All rights are reserved to the author.